Governor Rauner presents his budget with lots of cuts, and plenty of people are upset. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. Thanks for joining us on what's been quite a week in state government in Illinois. Boy. Here, luckily, we have a couple of Springfield watchers to help analyze the events of this past week. Kent Redfield is back. He's Professor Emeritus, Political Science at University of Illinois Springfield. Welcome back.
Good to be here.
Kent. You've been watching this stuff for a while. And Adam Rife, I think this is your first time on the show, correct?
Yes, sir.
Welcome, we appreciate that.
Thank you, Bernie.
Anchor and reporter for WICS-TV here in Springfield.
That's correct.
Okay, Governor Kent, have you ever seen a speech like this? Let's let's put it that way. Governor Rauner said the state was busted. He called this the last best chance to get our house in order as he presented his budget address. He presented, and we'll talk about pensions in particular in a bit, a new pension plan for current state employees as of June 1st if he has his way. He talked about cutting lots of programs, but giving some more money to education, but really massive. Give me your kind of analysis at this point.
I don't think anyone's ever seen a speech like that. At least, this is probably my 39th budget address, and the size of the cuts that he wants, the $4 billion plus in cuts is a staggering amount that he says that is in this. It was a very short speech.
Yeah.
Normally budget addresses have some length to it because governors are talking about how they're going to spend new money and new programs and
good things.
Yeah,
the good things that people want.
The good news took about a minute,
yeah.
And then he didn't get into a lot of detail. Just to pick one thing, he's proposing to cut funding for higher education by $380+ million, which is about a 31% cut. That did not make the list of things that he wanted to talk about in the budget address. So a lot of the detail that really upset people you didn't find until the budget books came out afterward.
And I think it's interesting that their administration would say, well, that's not 31% of the university's whole budget, because with tuition, with federal funds, with grants that they get, it's only a much smaller portion of their whole budget. But then you've got the U of I system saying it's more than $200 million to them, and it will cause problems. Adam, I don't know if this was the first Illinois budget address you've seen.
This was my first budget address, but it was unlike anything I'd read about in the past, because I think we saw in the governor's defense, he laid out what he said he would do. He said there are going to be huge cuts coming, and of course he delivered. This is unlike anything the states had to deal with before. It's only going to get worse if it's put off. And as Dr. Redfield mentioned, this wasn't a victory lap. It was a very short speech because there's not a whole lot of good to talk about. The governor is not going to harp on, at least in public at that stage, that this is a terrible situation for the state. Now it's time to work on how to fix it. You and I sat, along with several other journalists, with a senior budget official later, and that's kind of where we heard him throw his hands up and say, it was difficult to prioritize. We didn't know where to make these cuts. We had to look at things and slash everywhere. There were a lot of questions, how do you overlook a lot of the human services that had been cut? And this official just kind of said, it had to be done. We didn't want to, it had to be done. And that was a common theme that we heard. This is a massive amount of budget money that needs to be slashed, and they're down to the bone. There's not a whole lot of areas left to do it.
All right, one thing that the governor didn't do, during the campaign he talked about the wanting to reform the tax system, and talked about even adding sales tax to some services in Illinois that are not now taxed. We tax very few compared to most other states, or many other states. In the speech he said, though, and maybe it's just a negotiating position, this is what I am presenting to you today, and the time is not now to talk about increases in revenue. And then you had Speaker Madigan, who addressed the press afterwards, saying, I think there must be a you have to move your hands like Madigan does. A blend, a blend. We can't just cut. We'll need, some new revenues along with cuts. Was this just negotiating position? Do you think the tax increases or fee increases will be in there, Ken?
He did mention, if we get these other things done, we want to turn to it. There's no question that he really wants to reduce the size of state government. And this is a perfect opportunity from a budget standpoint. And he has been very critical of past administrations and past budgets for sleight of hand and claiming that we have revenue that we don't really have, which, this budget depends on savings of more than $2 billion from a pension proposal that has not been introduced in the General Assembly, that may not survive constitutional challenge. And if he doesn't get that pension plan and it does not survive, he just presented a budget that has a $2 billion hole in it.
Right.
And so, we need to be a little careful about what's honest. I mean, this is a budget that talks about how we would spend existing revenue, but instead of spending $1 billion more on pensions, which is what the law requires under current law, he's saying we can spend $1 billion less on pensions if we get this improved, if it and so, there are two sides to this. There's expenditures and revenues. He's obligated to say, here's how much money we have, this is how I would spend it. But he fudged it, because if you don't have pensions in there, there's no way he would have $300 million for education.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hypothetical in this budget, because we know the governor's not going to get everything he wants. We have a 500-page document that's going to be poured over the next 5 months. Plus, we may go into the summer, as some people are predicting now.
Right.
But this budget is assuming the governor gets everything he wants, and we know that that's just not realistic. That won't be the case. I was struck by the fact that he really didn't touch on revenue at all.
Right.
The sentence that I had highlighted, before revenue can be discussed, reform is essential, and he blew right past it and started talking about those cuts.
Yeah.
The issue really wasn't raised in this budget address, talking about service taxes, some of those things that he'd hit on the campaign, and in the first month of his tenure in office. It wasn't until we spoke with Speaker Madigan afterwards where the tax on millionaires was brought up, service
Right.
taxes, and as you say,
Yeah.
that blend that's going to be necessary.
Yeah, which is just interesting, because Speaker Madigan, I think he's been very cordial to the new governor, given the fact that he and President Cullerton of the Senate were among those who were attacked by Rauner ads during the campaign.
Very respectful, actually, Bernie,
he
a
was,
few times.
But by bringing up a solution as the 3% surcharge on millionaires for their an income tax surcharge for their income over $1 million, he did confirm at that press conference that would take a constitutional amendment,
Right.
and you're not going to get that's no revenue for a few years if you go through that process, because that has to be voted on by the public. So he's just kind of messing with the governor.
Yeah, a little bit. And a number of people noticed that when the governor was running, one of the turnaround papers he put out was about corporate welfare, and he had some very specific cuts. And I have not looked at, what the budget documents in that great a detail. So I don't know whether the complete elimination of the waiver on sales tax that newspapers get for printing on ink and those sorts of things. I mean, there's a tax expenditure in the code that he specifically singled out, along with something having to do with big oil. And we just didn't hear a lot about corporate welfare and those kinds of issues in terms of this address.
Just because there are so many, state employees in and around the Springfield area, that this pension plan, the legislature passed a pension plan like a couple of years ago. It is coming to a Supreme Court argument. I believe it's in March now.
Right. Yes.
It's already been found by Judge Bells in Sangamon County to be unconstitutional because you can't diminish benefits, and it was just going to diminish, as Speaker Madigan pointed out, kind of the increases that you get, the 3% annual increase that you get compounded if you are a retiree. So that in itself may not survive, but what Governor Rauner said is, we want everybody to keep the benefits you have earned till today, but as of the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st, go to the Tier 2 pension plan, which is for future earnings. Well, I'm sure that many people argue, certainly Speaker Madigan said that the theory is, if you're working in a job and you expect to be in a pension plan, and then it changes July 1st of this year, and so that your last 5 or 10 years working, you get a lesser pension, and it's more, it's a lower amount. That the Supreme Court may well find that's not constitutional either, because our state constitution does not allow you to diminish pension benefits as granted. So is that granted or not? And very few people other than the governor and his staff seem to think that would be constitutional, what he's proposing.
There's there's one legal opinion that kind of argues that from Sidney and Austin, but the majority of the legal opinion is that if the court throws out the current law, this SB 1, based on the logic in the case that would involve state employee retirement or health
insurance, right?
Health insurance.
They said you couldn't cut those premiums either.
That it's unlikely this would survive, and so the current budget assumes what we did last year. We made the full payment. This budget does not make the full payment, and in fact says we can make $1 billion less based on this idea that we could force, and that's really what we're talking about. This is not a voluntary, this is not a trade. This is moving everybody that is in Tier 1 onto a Tier 2, which requires the employee to pay more, retirement ages are longer, the benefits that you get back are less.
Yeah, and this is not only state employees, it's downstate teachers too.
This
and the only people he exempts are like local police and fire, because somehow you don't want to take on local police and fire, if that's right. One of the things he did, Adam, involving Springfield, is he kind of agreed with Speaker Madigan that the Presidential Library and Museum should become its own agency. So do you think that helps create any sort of grand bargain, or is it just a little thing in the grand scheme?
I think it's an early bargaining chip. I think they're very polite with each other in these first 5-6 weeks, very complimentary of each other. I want to thank Speaker Madigan for working with me. I respect the governor and thank him for working with me. I think it's a show of good faith, but again, working on that agency that I think everyone or most everyone in the legislature agrees that needs to be fixed, I think that's an easy agreement. I don't think that really shows, reaching across the aisle and shaking hands together. But it's an early stage of this. I don't know if it's an indicator of what we're going to see over the next couple months.
Right.
We did talk about the fiscal year 2015 budget when they say they're just days away from the deal.
Which is between now and it ends at the end of June.
June 30.
And we're running out of money because there wasn't enough money put in the budget
because it
last
wasn't
year when
balanced
Pat
in the first
Quinn was
place.
governor.
But Speaker Madigan said that he and the governor and presumably others in the legislature were close to a deal, days away, I think is what he said. I think that'll be a good indicator of how they're going to work together. But no real animosity. We've seen them polite. It's just they're starting to butt heads, I think.
They will indeed. One of the other ramifications here, and it kind of is one of those things where it is an example of the bind that everybody's in and that Governor Rauner ran about, but he would cut in half, and of course, again, they're saying cities get all this money from the state in various ways, but the income tax money, 8% of that now goes to cities, and that's like $1.2 or $1.3 billion total. And he would cut that in half, so it's like a $600 million cut to cities. I know Chicago will lose like $120 million. I think in Springfield it's in the $4 or $5 million range. Yeah. And that's just in kind of the local government distributed fund. It's part of the deal that the income tax is going to be shared with local governments. So he wants to do that, but he also wants to freeze property taxes,
right,
which was a campaign promise. He said it again during this speech. But that's the kind of thing where, well, if you take perhaps millions of dollars away from even medium-sized cities and you say they can't move their property taxes anywhere, aren't you asking unrealistic stuff or just forcing a complete change in philosophy of what government is?
Well, and you're shifting costs down to local governments and to property taxpayers. Most cities, most counties are under tremendous fiscal stress. Part of it is pensions, but part of it is the economy overall and costs in terms of municipal services. We're talking police and fire. Those are the major things that are driving those, what the municipal services you get. Those are the most expensive. So if you reduce, comes to cities and counties, no one else, not school districts, not townships, on a per capita basis. And if you're talking about cutting that in half, that puts a lot of pressure and if you're restricting, you're freezing property taxes, that increases the pressure. And I don't know that if we've fixed part of the problem at the state level and we end up laying off police and firemen at the local level, are the citizens better off if that's the outcome? There also are serious cuts to transportation, to mass transit, which affects the Chicago area dramatically in terms of moving people in and out of the city of Chicago and within employment within the
and
Northeast.
downstate mass transit district lose some of their state
and so
subsidy
that's
too.
critical to Peoria and Springfield and Champaign. So this is, you're putting a lot of pressure on the locals in areas that could actually, particularly if we're talking about disrupting transportation, that could have big impacts economically.
Yeah, I was also surprised there are even things in here like Division of Alcohol and Substance Abuse, 27 million reduction. I mean, that's for treatment centers, and the governor has talked about we need to work to reduce number of people in prisons, and you would think drug treatment is one of the good things. It seemed like there were some very quality programs, some in education, like I think special grants for advanced placement courses and things that are not funded here or reduced.
Mental health took a hit.
Yeah, and is he just, it's just odd to do those things. Do you think those are bargaining positions, or do you think, is it, again, just an indication of how crazy things are? I don't know.
A lot of it did seem arbitrary because, I remember asking the governor, how do you prioritize the massive number of issues that we have to deal with? And he talked about Ms. Ardwin that he had brought on, and all these advisors.
This is someone who has advised other Republican governors and states on how to cut their budgets significantly.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about how much Medicaid funding would be lost. Maybe you mentioned that.
But just trying to deal with how you prioritize where you're going to make these cuts. When we sat in that post-budget address press conference with the Office of Management and Budget, they just didn't have many answers. A quote I wrote down, mental health took a hit at the expense of developmental disabilities. They wanted to keep funding for developmental disabilities, but that meant
because those are the people the greatest in need, according to the senior budget person that talked to us.
Exactly, but
they can't take care of themselves.
It seemed arbitrary at the time to prioritize this over that, and it was just difficult to hear talking about CCAP funding. That especially is something that the governor wanted to keep, the child care funding at the same levels. A lot of acronyms as we learned from a lot of these
and
people.
And that's where they were running out of money, the $300 million that they needed until the end of the year. With I'm sure school districts in Illinois are still worried, but the governor did hold to his plan and to his promises to say, I'm going to give more to K through 12.
K through 12, sure, double down there.
And so I think it's something like a $300 million increase, at least in this proposal. And again, we stress, this is just the whole thing is just a proposal. It goes to the legislature. We see where it goes. So should school districts feel any comfort in this?
Well, school districts are still looking for their money from 2015.
Because there was a prorated cut because there wasn't enough in the budget.
And there's no guarantee that this money will get to, let's say, District 186 in Springfield. If you put $300 million into K through 12, and then you dramatically increase the number of charter schools, and you change the funding formula to give charter schools increase their per pupil share of state money that they get, then a lot of this may not, the potential is there that it doesn't get to public schools. When people in Springfield think of public schools, they think of 186 and Rochester and Pleasant Plains, Riverton. So there's, the fact that there's more money in there, it's a modest amount when you're talking about $6 billion for education, and there are no guarantees as to, exactly where it is going to go.
Right, and on Medicaid, he did say, I think it's more than $1.5 billion he wants to save, I think. And he wants to do that by reinstating something that has already been removed by an arbitrator. State employees are the ones now scrubbing the rolls of Medicaid to see if people are eligible. There used to be a private company. And the administration seemed to say, well, we think the administration just laid down and let the public employees take it back. If they had gone through a couple of hoops, you could have this outside firm that did a better job of making sure people getting Medicaid are eligible. On the same token, he did say that of all these people that have signed up under Obamacare for Medicaid,
Right.
which is now fully federally funded, at least at the beginning, they thought about taking that away, but the state is continuing to fund that or to keep that on. So very interesting. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah,
These are expensive items.
Yeah, the Medicaid is very complex. Taking someone off the rolls sounds good, except if you take someone off the rolls who has moved to Kansas and is no longer getting services, you haven't saved any money. People on Medicaid that work part-time can go on and off, back and forth during the course of the year. And so how much of this is real in terms of the saving, just to produce a number. And you get kind of the low-hanging fruit of the people that have moved to Kansas. It's much more difficult to get into the harder numbers. We're also making those Medicaid cuts by decreasing the amount that we're paying to providers.
The hospitals and nursing homes.
Yeah, if you can't get providers, won't take Medicaid people, then you're back at the emergency room. And the rates in Illinois are actually quite low compared to nationally.
And I think they say they're trying to cut those 12% in this budget.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And hospitals will not be happy. Nursing homes will not be happy.
Yeah. Who were big supporters of government plan.
Exactly. A lot of this, and it just goes with the theme of shifting the burden almost. Of course, there's only so much you can do at the state level, but circling back to local government, to the local government distributive fund, a lot of this is going to be shifting the burden on down, and hospitals tie in just another aspect of that. It's going to be difficult for those smaller level organizations to handle these cuts coming from the top, I think.
We're all shifting gears a little. We've also seen some changes, or seeing some changes in the legislature. Wayne Rosenthal from Morrisonville, Republican state representative, has been named by Governor Rauner to head the Department of Natural Resources. A law student, 22-year-old Avery Bourne, was named to take his place. She was sworn in at some point. That was, I don't know, I don't think they announced it in advance, unless I'm wrong about that.
We saw it happen.
Did you see it happen? But
we saw video of it, so it did happen.
Just video, that's right. And I saw it on a tweet.
Yes.
I did. I was among those that tried to ask her what she thought of the speech after the speech on her first day, and the staff guy that was with her just kind of said, "Not today," and ushered her out. So it was an odd beginning, because I think if you're in the legislature, you should at least be able to say, "I'm new here, but what he said sounded good and I'll evaluate it," but she did not stop to talk. So I don't know where that goes, but it's an interesting process, because now State Representative Rich Brower, who has been in the legislature, I should know the number of years, but it's more than a decade, from Petersburg, who represents part of Springfield, just announced in the last couple of days that he is resigning. We have heard rumors that he might take a state job. As we tape the show, we're not sure what that is. And then it will be up to the Republican county chairs to name a replacement in that district, which includes Sangamon County. So do we have any idea what's going on with all of this shuffling around? I thought Governor Rauner didn't like giving politicians jobs, but apparently it's okay in some cases.
Well, the no more business as usual has, I wouldn't say taken a hit in the past few weeks, but we did see the sister of a staffer was given another state job, and he's also dipping back into, as we said, those advisors who've worked on other campaigns, and now looking for state employees. We remember, of course, he wanted a farmer to lead the Department of Agriculture. He wanted people who knew about the industry to work in the departments, and this may be going back on that a little bit, going for the experience of former legislators.
Well, I have noticed some of his campaign staff people are, filling various slots within the government, but that always happens.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're going to work on a campaign for a year, and the new governor knows you would expect that. Yeah,
it certainly does happen. But I mean, a number of people pointed out that Representative Bourne is, her main qualifications seem to have been that she had worked on a number of political campaigns. She has never held a a job, what one would consider a job for more than 6 months.
For Rodney Davis and for Bruce Rauner.
She's a full-time law student, and so a lot of people, I think, who are familiar with the politics of the counties that make up that district probably have never heard of her. And so you see the hand of Governor Rauner, and the same thing is likely to take place in terms of the replacement for Rich Brower. He's working very hard to make sure that the Republican caucuses are going to be supportive of his legislative agenda, and we've seen that in a number of ways. This is another indication of that.
Nothing out of the ordinary here.
It's what happens. In the couple minutes we have remaining, and Kent, you would know this from all these years that I've been watching this too. Workers' compensation, business has complained that workers' compensation costs in Illinois are too high, that unemployment insurance costs are too high. They want tort reform, so maybe limits on damage awards in lawsuits, again, to help business. The governor is seeking, by what he says, to put all of this in a package, and he mentioned those things during the speech. But Democrats, I mean, this is a very Democratic state. Is he going to get any change in those things, or is this pie in the sky?
We're certainly going to get changes in workers' comp. And when you interviewed the head of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce yesterday, I think he was saying that we're going to get some kind of cooperative thing going here. Unemployment benefits, there's a lot of constraints in terms of what you can do federally unless you're talking about extended benefits. Tort reform is always a tough nut to crack.
Right. Yeah, but I know the Illinois trial lawyers, which the governor wants to even limit them from donating to judges, and yet the Trial Lawyers Association is rabid, saying he's just taking on injured people here.
I would be surprised if you don't get a workers' comp, a little unemployment insurance, business taxes, business regulations, minimum wage kind of agreement worked out. I think if we're just trying to pass something over the objections of the trade unions without making them a player in the process, that would be a very bad sign, and the governor doesn't have those kinds of numbers, and so you've got to get some kind of buy-in, and there, minimum wage, I think, will probably be part of it.
So, Adam, are you looking forward to the arguments that will happen in the legislature this year? Because it just seems like the sides are so far apart.
Yes, they really are. This is, I'm fascinated by it. It's without having a stake in the game, being able to watch it from the outside as we are at least professionally. It's going to be really incredible. This is a gentleman who's come in, and as he said, he's beholden to nobody. And I think
he certainly doesn't need it for personal gain.
No,
I mean, it's his philosophy. That's clear.
Fame or money or anything else. I think that should be reassuring at the very least. Is that he's not in it for personal gain. He's here to, whoever was going to take office was going to have a tough speech on Wednesday to talk about the cuts that were going to be made and the state of the state. And I'd rather him than me or anybody else I know, because it's going to be a huge challenge. But he has nothing to lose. It's a lot to gain if he pulls it off. But as the governor said in his budget address, this is not a one-year solution. No. It's going to take quite a while.
And it'll be interesting to see the reaction in future campaigns as legislators run for office based on all of this stuff, because the governor said, I'm willing to take arrows. Well, arrows are flying.
That's right.
Kent Redfield, Adam Rife, thanks for being here and talking about it. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.